video is my opinion and for entertainment purposes only.
Hello, my dears. It's me, ordinary girl trying to be fabulous, and welcome to my channel. Welcome to my subscribers. Welcome to my new subscribers, and welcome to those of you who are not subscribed. If you are not subscribed and you enjoy my content, I hope you will consider doing so. And even if you don't enjoy my content, I hope you'll consider subscribing, because who doesn't love a good hate watch? I know I do. So yeah, if you could consider subscribing, and I love comments, and so leave me a comment. And just for the fun of it, just for yucks, doggies. So 2 weeks ago, I said we were going to talk about this book, and that's what we're going to do today. And I had not read it before. I read The Great Gatsby, and I enjoyed that one. And then when I started reading this one, I was wondering what I got myself into, because this book is a lot. And I'm just glad that it only has like 9 chapters, because if it was a really long book, I don't know, I would probably be like, sorry, I made a mistake, it's a lot. Because, like I said, it's a lot. So, with that, let's get into the video. Let's talk about chapter 1 of this book that is a lot. So, this week we will see if my remote shutter will work, because the last time I tried to make a video, it was going haywire. And so far it's not working, but we're going to keep trying. But that's not what... So, if my video suddenly changes, you'll know it's because the shutter quit working. Again. Okay, so, every time we talk about a chapter, the first part of the video, I'm going to have a summary of the chapter, because, like I said, this book is a lot. I have a couple of pages of notes. So yeah, this book is a lot. So, okay, first chapter opens up, and we have the main character, who is Anthony Patch. He is 25 years old. It is 1913. And the supporting characters are Adam J. Patch, his grandfather. There's his father, Adam Ulysses Patch, and his mother, Henrietta LeBrun, but they're not around much, and you will have to stay with the video to find out why if you haven't read the book. Let's see. Anthony is a dandy. He was born into a life of privilege. Everything that he has, he didn't earn. And he kind of floats around, like a social butterfly. If you think about it, he lives a life of ennui, which is a life of boredom and dissipation, and, I'm so rich that I don't have to do anything. I can be bored and just dabble here and there. So, Anthony is plain. He is not attractive, but yet he's obsessed with looks, and he's obsessed with clothes, and he's especially obsessed with how every woman looks. He's got a lot to say on how the women he encounters looks. Let's see. So he finds his appearance and how he spends his time and the people he spends his time with to be most important. And that's basically why this book is a lot, because if someone wrote this book today, it would not be published. I'm certain it would not be published, because it's like so a book of its time. And really don't want to go into detail because I gotta save something for the video. So let's get into chapter 1, because like I said, this book is a lot. So as chapter 1 opens, we have our main character, who is Anthony Patch. The book opens in 1913. He is 25 and he thinks very highly of himself. We have this from the book, which is very great because it's like back here, so I don't have to find it. But he thinks himself rather exceptional young man, thoroughly sophisticated, well adjusted to his environment, and somewhat more significant than anyone else he knows. So, Anthony Patch, his claim to fame and social standing was built by his grandfather, who is Adam J. Patch, and his grandfather is completely different, complete 180 from his grandson. He fought in the Civil War, made the rank of major, and then he went to work and made $75 million on Wall Street. Okay, so, $75 million in the late 1800s. He was the Jeff Bezos of his time. Think of it that way, because I'm bad at math, so I did like an inflation calculator, and 75 million today is 2 billion, I think. So yeah, like he's the Jeff Bezos of his time. Let's see. And then, he has an attack of what the author calls sclerosis, which I Googled, and it is multiple sclerosis. I don't know anything about that, except that the treatments for sclerosis in the late 1800s, early 1900s were poison. If anybody wants to talk about their experience with multiple sclerosis in the comments, you are welcome to. I just don't have any experience with it, so I don't feel comfortable, spouting off facts about it because I don't know any facts about it. So, he marries Alicia Withers, who is anemic. They didn't say what kind of anemia she had, just that she was anemic. Let's see, there's pernicious anemia, where you have trouble absorbing B12, and then there's anemia, where you don't have enough red blood cells and you have trouble absorbing oxygen, I believe. And Alicia Withers had $100,000, which is not much compared to a man who has 75 million. So the Alicia Withers gave him a son, Adam Ulysses Patch. So Adam Ulysses Patch also sort of lived a life of ennui and dissipation. And Anthony's mother, Henrietta LeBrun, the Boston Society contralto, who also died young. So we don't know much about Henrietta LeBrun, just that she sang and she was a contralto, which I thought I had never heard. But if you listen to people like Amy Winehouse, and Adele is also a contralto, very smooth. I think a voice like fine whiskey, even though I've never had whiskey, but they have a beautiful, smooth, low voice that it's just beautiful. So I imagine, that's what she would sound like too. Let's see. So his mother dies young. He doesn't have much memory of her. His father was always promising him things and never, ever delivered on his promise. The one time he delivered on his promise and took him on a trip, he dies too. Which is pretty, like, wow, to watch your father die in front of you of what I deem heart attack or maybe a stroke, the way they describe it. Some type of seizure. Something horrible. So then we move on, and his grandmother, who was anemic, also died. So, young Anthony is surrounded by a lot of death. So, in the process of, his grandfather's life, he goes from the sort of, life of industry, and then he becomes the reformer among reformers, emulating the magnificent efforts of Anthony Comstock. That's who his grandson was named after. He leveled a varied assortment of uppercuts and body blows at liquor, literature, vice, art, patent medicines, and Sunday theaters. His mind, under the influence of that insidious mildew, which eventually armchair in the office of his Terrytown estate, he directed against the enormous hypothetical enemy, unrighteous, a campaign which went through on for 15 years. So anyways, he goes from the life of industry, and then all of a sudden he's like, hates everything fun. And he probably would hate everything his grandson would become, because his grandson was kind of, well, let's read more. So at the age of 11, he knew the horror of death. He had lost both of his parents. As we read before, his father died in front of him. His grandmother had faded off almost imperceptibly. And I can't imagine what that would do to someone's mind or their feelings. That's unimaginable. So at 14, he enjoyed stamps. Everything stamps. Stamps kept him up at night. By 16, he was, within himself, an articulate boy, thoroughly un-American and politely bewildered by his contemporaries. So he was awkward. He was an awkward 16-year-old. But I don't know many 16-year-olds who aren't awkward. I was an awkward teenager, and I don't know if I've still grown out of it. So he spends 2 years in Europe with a tutor who convinces him to go to Harvard and says, so he went to Harvard because there was no other logical thing for him. There was no other logical thing to be done with him. So, he's at Harvard and he's awkward and he just is within himself. He's shy. He has a huge allowance with which he buys clothes that he never wears because they're too silly to be worn out. So he wears them in his room, in front of his mirror. Can't necessarily say that I blame him, because I have shoes that are really, really pretty, and I will never wear them again. But I can't bear to donate them, which I really should donate them, because they could go to somebody who could wear them. It's better than sitting in my room collecting dust. So he's in Harvard, and he just kind of floats around and does whatever. And he finds in his senior year that he gets in a position in a class. He's, shy, the shy, silent type. So he's looked upon as rather romantic. And so he likes this. He likes his mysterious air that everybody has put on him. even though it's just because he's awkward and doesn't really know how to talk to people. You know, except for all the money he has, Anthony and I have a lot in common. So he made the pudding, which is a theatrical award. I don't know. I didn't go to Harvard. Um, and he graduates in 1909 at the age of 20. He might have done extremely well if he hadn't have been so young going to school. So he goes to Rome and he dilly-dallies, like I said, the life of ennui, life of boredom, life of being able to do whatever you want because you have as much money as you could possibly dream of. So he comes back to America because his grandfather's illness has flared up. And he is excessively tired of the talk about his grandfather's flare up. Probably if he'd known more about the illness his grandfather had, he wouldn't have been so flippant about it. So, I mean, he comes home, and I think it's rather begrudgingly, and he wishes that when he came home, his grandfather was dead. And that, to me, even though he has known a lot of death, so he's not very sentimental. He's not very sentimental about death. He would just, and also, his grandfather has a great fortune he's amassed, and he's the sole heir. So when his grandfather dies, he's going to inherit all of it. So, I mean, to me, that's really mean. Because I never knew my grandfather, either grandfather. I knew my maternal grandmother, and I was very sad when she died. So I can't imagine wishing her dead. It just seems very odd, very strange to me that somebody would wish a family member dead. So our hero, Anthony, has a beautiful apartment. It is a renovated brownstone, and his favorite spot in the apartment is the bathroom. The bathroom has a beautiful bathtub with a book holder, and from what I read, I believe it also has indoor plumbing. So the outside of the bathtub is a carpet, a beautiful, luxurious carpet. And in my imagination, a beautiful, warm bathtub with a luxurious carpet to step on would mean that nothing in his life is hard. He just kind of floats from everything, from the tub to the bath to the carpet. It's just nothing in his life is hard. And he has a servant who does all the cleaning and fixes his breakfast because the only place he eats at home is breakfast. He visits his broker once a week to make him feel like he's doing something, like he has a useful occupation. He says his allowance is enough at just under $7,000 a year. In the interest on the money that's inherited from his mother. His grandfather gives him a $500 bond for Christmas every year, which he sells. And I know nothing about bonds or wealthy people. That's one thing that I do not share with Mr. Patch. Because in 2022, you have like annuities and structured settlements where you get a payment every month. But then you have these people who come along singing and they're like, well, we'll buy your annuity or your structured settlement. But the thing is that I believe they buy them from you for just a percentage of the actual annuity or structured settlement. So I would imagine that the $500 bond that his grandfather gives him, I would imagine that he doesn't sell it for full price because there's no money in that for the person who buys the bond. So, I mean, if he like just waited a little bit, he could probably cash it in for full value. But, you know, his life of idleness, I don't think he knows how to wait for anything. He gets what he wants whenever he wants it. And Grandpa didn't even give his own son a more liberal allowance. So he's definitely not going to give Anthony a more liberal allowance because he doesn't think he needs it. So remember, when Anthony came home from Rome, he was hoping to find his grandfather dead. But much to his chagrin, he found out that his grandfather had rallied and was doing much better. Gotta keep that in mind. Because Anthony goes out to Tarrytown to have a discussion with his grandfather. And they come up to each other and they gravely shake hands. And the senior Patch comments on how he's late. So we are thinking that there is no love lost between the senior Patch and the junior Patch. Because, like I'm saying, Anthony seems to be everything his grandfather dislikes. So Grandpa has a secretary named Edward Shuttleworth. And Edward Shuttleworth had been a saloon keeper, a gambler, and a general reprobate. And then he was, in a manner of speaking, born again, which is what Grandpa likes. So, much to Anthony's chagrin, Mr. Shuttleworth sits down and listens in on the conversation between Grandpa and Anthony. And like I was saying, I don't think Grandpa and Anthony, I don't think there's any love lost between either of them because, you know, Anthony Comstock Patch was named after a great reformer, and he is not living up to his name. And Grandpa wants him to leave a legacy. You know, not a legacy of wanton disregard of everything and always getting your way and having everything you want. And Anthony wants to write a book about the Middle Ages. And Grandpa's like, why the Middle Ages? Why not write about the Revolution or the Civil War or something like that? And Anthony's like, well, I like the Middle Ages. So they leave, and so, but before they leave, he's like, well, when will this wonderful book be done? And he's like, well, you know, there's this and there's that, there's this and there's that. And then, so then their conversation concludes. Anthony thinks about his book that he's going to write. He kind of puts together an outline in his head. And then, you know, he just kind of like thinks and forgets about it completely. So much to Grandpa's chagrin, Anthony probably will not leave a lasting legacy. At least not the legacy that Grandpa would have him leave. So Anthony has come home from his visit with his grandpa, and, you know, he's forgotten all his grand plans. And so then he is getting ready to take a bath in his beautiful bathtub that is just beautiful. And he is finishing up a chapter of a book called Erewhon, which is quite interesting because Erewhon is a book by Butler that is about Victorian satire. And Anthony Patch is a protagonist in a book that is about Jazz Age satire. Well, it's not quite Jazz Age yet because the Jazz Age happened after World War I. I believe it's also called the progressive age. So he takes a bath and he gets out, spends way too much time drying himself off. And he lights his cigarette because people smoked a lot back then. And he looks out his window and he sees this beautiful woman, or what he thinks is a beautiful woman. He thinks she's beautiful. She's wearing a red negligee and she's on a parapet, and she is drying her hair in the warm October sun, and he's feeling all kinds of feelings for her. And so he's just taken with this woman in the red negligee, and children are playing, and he watches her for several minutes, and he's feeling all kinds of feels. And the warm afternoon and the red, and then she stands up and he finds out. So the woman was standing up now. She had tossed her hair back and he had a full view of her. She was fat, full 35, utterly undistinguished. So, like I said, he is way too interested in the superficial. And I bet Miss Red Negligee, or Mrs. Red Negligee, probably was looking across the alleyway and saw him, and she probably thought, "Wow, what an odd-looking, skinny little man with ridiculous hair." So, and then he quickly forgets about her because he's just all into the superficial. So Anthony is about to meet two of his friends for dinner. After he dresses, he's completely forgotten about Miss Red Negligee, because that's how he is. And his two friends, Maureen Noble and Richard Dick Caramel, are people he considers to be as good as he is. Actually, better. He doesn't really have an affection for Maureen Noble. It's more of a respect than affection, but he still considers him his best friend. And then his friend Dick Caramel, who is late, is writing a book, which is what Anthony wishes he could do. And he makes sure to let us know that Richard Caramel, Dick Caramel, is going to be fat and bald by the time he's 35. He's got this thing with 35. Like, 35 is a horrible thing. And so these are his contemporaries, and he thinks that he is, is at least as good as them, but they're better. So it's a very interesting relationship. So after dinner, he goes with Maury to a musical called Hijinks. So it's a comedy musical, and he spends the night looking on the people in the audience versus looking on the satire that's happening on stage. And of course, once again, he finds fault with the women in the audience. And so this man is just something. And as he's leaving the theater, he sees a woman in an enclosed cab known as a beauty. And we should mark that in our mind, because I have a feeling she's going to be a part of the story from here on out. So at the end of the night, he is sitting in his apartment, and he's finally finally felt like he found his place in New York City. There's a rare pungency. And so he's smoking, he's listening to the church bells of St. Anne's down the street, and he's finding himself in solitude, which he generally doesn't like. He had grown up lonely, and so he would always find something to do. If he had no engagement, he would find someone to be with, a friend or something like that. And so he's just sitting there in solitude thinking about the about life and the way it is, and how his street is safe and how he feels safe. In the final part of the chapter, we have a flashback in paradise. You have two characters, and it's written like a play. And there's Beauty, who is born every 100 years, and she sits in a waiting room. And then we have the Voice, who blows on white gusts of wind, and the occasional star. So Beauty is being told of her next assignment, and that she is going to have it for 15 years. And so, Beauty asks what her assignment is, and her assignment, she will be reborn as a ragtime kid, a flapper, a jazz baby, a baby vamp. She'll dance the new dances, neither more nor less gracefully than you danced the old ones. And she will be paid in love. She will love, and she will be paid in love. And so that ends the dialogue with Beauty sitting quietly. And this conversation took place 7 years before Anthony is sitting by his front window of his apartment and listening to the chimes of St. Anne's. And so that's the end of the chapter. And now I guess we could have questions that we are talking about. So I have a few questions that I think would be good for discussion, and you can answer them in the comment section. And I just want everybody to remember to stay civil and kind, because I have the power to delete and block and turn off comments if I choose. So just keep it in mind. Stay civil and kind. And if you see a comment in the comment section that you think is not civil or kind, you can tag me, and it'll pop up, it will highlight, and I will be sure to get it. So with that, let's get started on these questions. Okay, so I chose Beautiful and Damned because I saw it was on a banned book list. After reading the first chapter, do you agree with this book being banned? Why or why not? After he experiences the death of his mother, father, and grandmother, all in a short period of time, is the reaction of Anthony wishing his grandfather to be dead shocking? Do you think Anthony will ever write his book on the Middle Ages? Do you have any experience with multiple sclerosis or anemia? Is the Beauty that is mentioned in the cab the same Beauty who is about to be reborn? What kind of person do you think the Beauty in the reborn is, if she is described as a baby vamp? Is Grandpa as virtuous as he appears to be, Or does he have a deep, dark secret? Like I said, answer the questions in the comment section and let's have a good old discussion. And then we will come back here on October 25th to go over chapter 2. That is, if I'm not canceled off of YouTube for talking about a banned book. So let's hope we can come back on October 25th because I really enjoy this. This is a lot of fun. This was hard. This was outside of my comfort zone, but it was a lot of fun. And I want to keep doing it. So with that, I want to say thank you, especially if you've made it this far, and especially if you plan to participate in the comment section. Because without you, my viewers, I would not have a channel. So I really appreciate you. And thank you. And I'll see you in the next video, which will be a lot sooner than October 25th. Bye. See you in the next video.